This story takes place in an American village in the year 1990. Rosary was the most beautiful girl in the village, and despite her young age, she was 14 years old. She was bold and not afraid of anything, and she was always superior to her friends and colleagues in the way she thought and treated herself. With various matters, Rosary was deeply loved by everyone, whether from classmates at school, from friends, from teachers and neighbors in the village. The village was small and everyone knew each other. The houses were simple, 1 or 2 floors high, and the level of families living in those villages was okay. The houses were all the same, except for one house, or we can say it was a palace, which was located on the hill in the highest area of the village. But it was empty and no one lived in it, which made everyone feel that it was haunted. It was not just a rumor. Rather, it was a fixed belief among many people, and this house was an area of curiosity for many intruders and those wishing to experience a new adventure. One time, Rosary was playing Truth or Dare with her friends, and one of the girls asked her the question, "What is the thing that scares you?" Rosary replied, "Nothing. I am not afraid of anything." And here the friends felt that Rosary was arrogant, and of course not that brave. The game continued until it was Rosary's turn again, and then she chose the challenge. It was the same friend who asked her the first time to challenge her, "As long as you fear anything, well, I challenge you to enter the house on the hill." Rosary looked at her smiling and shook her head and said, "No problem, just set a time and I will go there." Another friend of Rosary said, "You will enter the house?" Rosary answered again, "Yes, I will go into the house." And another said, "Are you going to walk around the rooms?" Rosary answered affirmatively, "Yes, I will walk around the rooms." The girls laughed at what Rosary said, so she felt the necessity of winning this challenge, and that is why she said to them, "Tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the evening, after the end of the school day, I will go to the house on the hill, and I will walk around the rooms." The girls' session ended, and Rosary decided to return to her home. Rosary was indeed bold and not afraid of anything. She was not afraid of high places, nor closed places, nor was she afraid of animals or insects. But the only thing she was afraid of was the supernatural, everything she could not see in front of her. Any mention of these things sent shivers through her entire body, and despite this, she felt that she could not back down now. She had made a promise to her friends that she must not break it in order to maintain her image in front of everyone. Rosary arrived home and began searching through her father's things for the largest flashlight to take with her tomorrow. Rosary was unable to sleep well that night and had many nightmares. She felt that these nightmares might be a signal for her to abandon her plan for tomorrow, but she could not do so. This is because she knows that if she backs down now, everyone will accuse her of being coward, and thus the image that she wants people to see of her will change. The next morning, she went to her school after a long night and interrupted sleep. She made sure to put the flashlight in her bag so that she would not forget it. She did not concentrate well on her lessons that day and did not interact as usual with the rest of her friends. Her friend Jane said to her, "Rosary, there is no need to do this ridiculous challenge. We all know that this house is haunted and no one goes there." Rosary tried to appear calm and said to her, "Don't worry, I don't feel afraid, everything will be fine." And here Jane felt that Rosary would not listen to her, so she stopped talking. As for the rest of the friends, they came one after another to ask Rosary whether she was really going or not. Rosary was confirming that she was going, and she felt inside her that her friends were waiting for her to tell them that she was not going in order to annoy her, so she decided not to give them that opportunity. The school day ended and Rosary gathered her things. She went to her friends and told them that she was going to the house on the hill, and here one of the friends suggested that they go with her to the beginning of the road in order to make sure that she would actually do the challenge and not run away from it. Rosary felt angry because they did not trust her, but she agreed to that proposal anyway, so she walked. The friends headed towards the hill house, leaving Rosary alone to continue the journey. Rosary stood alone at the beginning of the road and decided to continue on her way without hesitation. She said to herself, "Okay, that's okay, nothing will happen." This sentence was a reassurance that Rosary said to herself in order to complete the challenge, but she did not know how many atrocities she would see and happen to her in this house. Rosary walked down the road and the house began to appear from the top of the hill. It was a large mansion built of large crimson bricks. The entire mansion was covered in ivy. The trees around the house were large and gloomy, adding to its terrifying appearance, obscuring the view of anyone coming from the road. The pine trees looked like The huge animals surrounding the palace seemed to protect it, and it seemed that they had not been pruned for years. Rosary approached the palace, and here she noticed the wild grass that surrounded the palace from everywhere. Rosary raised her head to the upper floor, and there she saw the curtains in one of the rooms. The curtains were moving back and forth more than once, as if there was something or someone moving them. At this time, Rosary felt that her feet were shaking, and she was no longer able to breathe evenly. She felt as if there was a large mass of air formed in her throat and was not moving, and she was seriously thinking about withdrawing from this challenge. But she remembered her friends and then decided to continue her way inside the house. Rosary arrived at the door of the palace, and then she took out the large lamp that she had brought with her, and at that time she felt that this lamp was not large enough. Her hand was shaking, her heart was beating quickly, and she was sweating. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she looked at the palace before extending her hand to open the door. She looked up and found that the sky was overcast, and the sun had completely set. The sky had turned gray. She felt that this was a bad omen, but she continued what she was doing. She grabbed the handle of the pedal and turned it skillfully, and then the door opened with ease. Well, nothing happened. Here, Rosary felt that perhaps she had exaggerated her fear, and she must relax and deal with the matter normally, and indeed her breathing regulated. But at the same moment she felt that there were jaws closing on her ankles, and before she could do anything, the palace door closed forcefully behind her, and here everything went black. She searched with her hand for the button to turn on the flashlight and quickly pressed it to see what was around her. Before she could see anything, a paper fell on her head. The paper looked old, as if it had been cut from an old letter. The color of the paper was yellow and it was written on it, "Destruction will seize your soul. If you have wisdom, get out immediately. Fear is fate. Retreat now before the Red Army comes soon." Rosary felt that this message was more like a threatening message, but she did not know how to act. Should she go back outside again and lose the challenge in front of her friends, or she completes the challenge and walks around the rooms as she promised her friends? Here, the pain intensifies for her again, so she looks at her feet using a flashlight. Here, she notices that what is placed on her ankle is a mousetrap. Rosary looked around and found dozens of mousetraps prepared to catch anything, and here Rosary freed her foot from that trap and disabling the rest of the traps in the room. After Rosary finished disabling the traps, she began to look at the walls around her. Many of the paintings were hanging. They were pictures of people. They seemed to be the people who lived in this palace. Rosary felt that they were looking at her, staring at her, despite the layers of dust and cobwebs that had accumulated on those paintings. Their gazes were sharp. Rosary did not want to waste any more time, and here she began to move forward, but she felt that someone was following her. Rosary heard a whisper coming from one of the corners of the room. It was a weak whisper, and that is why it took Rosary some time to distinguish what this faint whisper was saying. It was one sentence: "Go back to your home." It was followed by a groaning sound, or perhaps the sound of chewing food. It was a sound that Rosary could not recognize. The pain in her foot was very sharp, and she felt that the trap had injured her greatly. Rosary felt blood flowing from her feet. Rosary continued forward until she heard cello music. It was beautiful music despite the general terror surrounding Rosary. Rosary moved towards the sound of the music, and then she entered a large open hall. It was similar to large dance halls that were designed in the old style, and there was a huge chandelier hanging from the high ceiling. The entire walls of the hall were covered with paintings in a golden frame, paintings with angels painted on them. Angels were smiling, but it was not at all comfortable for Rosary. Rosary was walking and wandering cautiously in the hall, holding the flashlight in her hand. The floors were made of wood, and it seemed that it had not been taken care of for decades, which is why it was making very bad noises. Rosary could also hear her loud steps. The volume of the music rose, and despite that, Rosary could hear the sound of her unstable heartbeat. At the same time, a cold wind was blowing through the broken window, which caused the curtains to move, which also made a sound and changed shape, becoming extremely terrifying. Rosary felt that the house had come back to life. She was standing looking at everything around her in amazement and stillness. There was a creaking sound coming from somewhere, but it certainly did not come from Rosary as she did not move. The sound was coming from more than one place at this time, and here, drops of sweat began to fall on her forehead, which made her feel more afraid because she felt that those drops were turning into small spiders crawling on her face. Suddenly, she found herself staring into the hollow eyes of a skeleton. She wanted to scream, but she was unable to get a single sound out. In front of her, the skeleton was covered in red blood and had pieces of raw meat hanging from more than one area of it. Rosary was looking at him in horror when she noticed that his hands were moving, and then she noticed that this skeleton was the one playing the cello. The skeleton was moving his arm to pull the bow was in regular movements, and before Rosary could comprehend the terrible scene she was seeing in front of her, the lights inside the hall turned on, and the skeleton began to speed up its movements. And then the arms began to rise and wave in the air, like the arms of a madman. The skeleton was shaking violently, and the cello fell, causing a loud and resounding ringing. It was terrible and unbearable for Rosary, who did not know how to react. All she had to do was kick the skeleton in the ribs, and it immediately stopped moving and shaking. Here she noticed that the skeleton was tied with thin, transparent threads, and the arms were fastened with those same threads. Rosary also noticed that there was a small recorder placed inside the cello, and it fell to the ground when the cello fell. Rosary calmed down and breathed comfortably, and felt that perhaps someone had done this to scare her, and she began to think that perhaps those who had done this were her friends. The hall began to shake, and long nails, each nail about 4 or 5 centimeters long, began to emerge from the walls of the hall at a height of 4 feet. The nails were coming out of the walls in succession, which made Rosary run in order to hide from those flying nails that she did not know how or from where they came. And here the flashlight fell from Rosary's hand while she was running. She was barely passing the nails shooting from the walls, but unfortunately she was unable to avoid one of the nails, which passed near her foot and scratched her, leaving her with a large and painful wound in her leg. Rosary felt the pain, but she could not stop and continued running. After Rosary hid in an area where the nails could not reach, she realized that the nails come in whole rows, and each time they become faster than the time before. And here Rosary felt that perhaps the nails would come from another direction, and here she had to escape from this house. But she could not pass through the same hall again. There was only the stairs in front of her. She decided to go up. Perhaps she would find another door through which she could exit from this house, and when she started to climb the stairs, she felt that something was pulling her foot down, and she was unable to save herself. She fell, but fortunately she was hanging on the edge of the stairs, dangling over the flying nails, and this was the first time that Rosemary screamed, because she was afraid of falling, and at the same time she began to feel that the walls were closing in on her, and that there were invisible hands reaching out to catch her. Here, Rosary tried to estimate the distance between her and the ground, and when she felt that the distance was not far, she threw herself and began to run. Unfortunately, darkness was enveloping everything, and this what made Rosary lose her sense of direction, and all she felt was that she was running in circles, swirls of darkness. The sounds of the wind rose again, as if they were howling, and the sound of the creaking floor also returned, which made the adrenaline flow strongly in Rosary's body. Here, her body began to respond better, and she began to move more quickly. She could no longer hear anything except her heartbeat, and she began to run again towards one of the doors. When she left that door, she found herself losing her balance and falling to the ground. The room was completely dark, and the feeling returned to her that there were shadows hovering around her and wanting to swallow her. Her fear settled in her heart because she knew deep down that she was not alone in this darkness. Rosary began to tremble. She started moving slowly while she was on the floor, and then the room was lit up with a dim light, and there was a recording device that started working without warning. It was placed on a large bed in the middle of the room, and the bed covers were completely torn, and under those covers another skeleton appeared. It was very thin and also was covered in blood. It was a terrifying sight, especially when this skeleton opened his mouth as if he was about to speak, and then he started shaking like crazy. And here Rosary pushed him away with one blow, so he fell to the ground and stopped shaking. Then everything returned to calm again. Rosary looked at the skeleton and found that it was also tied with a number of transparent strings that seemed to be moving by someone. And then Rosary felt that there was someone with her in the room. She could hear the sound of his breathing, and here she moved her head to the left and found him. He was an old man who seemed to be older than 80 years old. He was sitting in a large rocking chair next to the window, and as soon as Rosary looked at him, he said to her, "You found me." He was whispering in a hoarse voice, which made goosebumps run through Rosary's entire body. She was looking at him. He was an old, withered man with a frail face and many wrinkles on his face. His skin and hair were all white. He was bent over the chair as if stuck to it, and he had a look of resignation on his face for someone who was sure he didn't have much left to live. "Are you a ghost?" Rosary said fearfully. The man said to her, "Is that what you think?" She said, feeling embarrassed and not knowing who she was talking to, whether it was a ghost or a human. "No, but everyone says that this house is haunted. Everyone believes that there is no one living in this house." The man replied sarcastically, "Everyone loved Stalin and said he was different from Hitler. Were they right? They were both bad." Rosary looked again at the man and noticed his poor condition and his shabby clothes. Although she felt pity for him, she was overcome with anxiety. She did not know who this man was and what his intentions were towards her. Rosary replied, "But what is the matter with all the traps you are placing down there?" The old man looked at her with a smile from his tired blue eyes. "Do you think you are the only one who came here? You are the first one to come to my house?" Then the man laughed bitterly, continuing his speech. "Every night, curious people come and knock on my door. They enter and vandalize the house, and some of them steal some of the contents." At that moment, Rosary felt sad for this man. He was just an old man, waiting for his end alone in his house, and everyone seemed to be bothering him. Rosary took 2 steps closer and said to him, "Why don't you get out of here? Maybe if you thought about moving to another place, everyone would leave you alone." The man said to her as if he was blaming her, "Girl, listen to me. Why should I move from my place? From my home? I have lived here all my life. My father died in the room opposite the large hall. This house is my family's legacy, and if there are curious people or vandals who come to my house, it's so that they can harass me. That is their problem. Everyone says that my house is haunted, but it is not. It is enough that I know this fact, and that is all that matters to me." There was a strange silence after the old man's words. Rosary was thinking about what he had just said to her, and then she felt sorry and remorseful for breaking into his house in that way. Then she said to him, "I'm sorry." The old man did not respond, so she continued, "I shouldn't have believed the rumors." He did not respond. She was silent for a minute, and when it became clear to her that he did not want to continue the conversation, she felt even more guilty, and her breath hitched, until she sighed loudly and turned to leave the room and the entire house. Here the man stopped her by asking, "Why did you come to my house?" Rosary opened her mouth and tried to speak, but she was unable to say anything. No sound came out of her. How could she tell him that she had come to his house because of a challenge in a silly game with some friends? She felt like a scaredy cat the whole time, but she could not let her friends accuse her of fear and cowardice. Her pride overcame her, and she ignored her instincts and went to that house. And now she knows that she never had the right to do this, and that what she did was wrong by all standards. And at that time, she tried to imagine the number of accidents that she was almost exposed to in this house. What would she do so if one of the nails hit her? And here the old man spoke, saying, "Remember, girl, you must always know who you are. It does not matter what others think. It does not matter what anyone thinks. It does not matter the rumors they spread about you. The important thing is that you know the truth." And here she nodded her head once and then left the room and the whole house to return to her home. She was thinking about what this man had said to her, and when she left the house, she took one last look at the house, and here she felt that her vision of the house had completely changed after she spoke to this man. She stood in front of the house. It was beautiful despite all its damage. It was not terrifying anymore. Yes, Rosary was no longer afraid of the house now. A smile formed on her lips, and she thought of this wise old man whom she had just met at home. Rosary thought about her friends and decided that most of them did not deserve her friendship, and she decided that she should look for new friends, friends who loved her personality and pride and did not hate her for her difference. She also looked at herself again and felt that she did not owe anyone an excuse and that she was proud of her personality. She has unique ideas, and therefore there is no need for her to make any additional effort to convince others of her. She is perfect the way she is.